This looks like nature. Blue water, wooded islands, a shoreline that curves so gracefully it seems to have always been here. It has not. Almost everything you are about to see was built. The shorelines were cut, the bottoms were deepened, the marshes were filled, the channels between these lakes were dug by steam dredges, and the whole loop was drawn on paper before a single shovel went into the ground. This is a landscape wearing a very convincing disguise. Let us take it apart. We are in southwest Minneapolis, Minnesota, on the chain of lakes. 5 lakes sit here in a rough line: Brownie, Cedar, Lake of the Isles, Bde Maka Ska, and Lake Harriet, joined by artificial channels and wrapped in Parkway. Bde Maka Ska is the largest and deepest lake inside the city, roughly 400 acres, and close to 90 feet deep at its deepest point. Lake of the Isles is smaller, about 109 acres. Around them runs a 50-mile ring of parks called the Grand Rounds. Start with the ice, because everything else is a footnote to it. During the last glaciation, the Laurentide ice sheet spread down across this ground. In this region, the ice pushed over the St. Croix moraine and threw off a branch that geologists call the Grantsburg Sublobe, a tongue of ice that ran northeast toward what is now Grantsburg, Wisconsin. That branch shoved itself across the upper channel of the Mississippi and blocked it. Meltwater and sand had to find another way out. When the ice finally pulled back, roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, it did not leave a clean surface. It left buried blocks of ice, stranded in the sand and gravel that the meltwater had dumped in the old valleys. Sediment settled around them and on top of them. Then slowly, the buried ice melted, and the ground above it collapsed into the hole. That is a kettle. Every lake we pass today began as a chunk of ice that took its time dying. Bde Maka Ska is a kettle, and a deep one. Its floor sits far below the surrounding land, which is why the lake is close to 90 feet deep in a city built on flat outwash sand. Lake of the Isles was the shallow one, the runt of the chain, a broad, low basin that never got the depth its neighbors got. That single accident of geology is the reason Lake of the Isles was the one they had to rebuild. Picture this ground before any of it was drawn on a map. Open oak savanna on the rises, tall grass prairie running west, big woods of elm and basswood and maple crowding the water. The lake basins held a mix of clear water and shallow marsh, ringed with cattail and wild rice and tamarack. The lakes did not have tidy edges. They faded into wetland, and the wetland faded into land, and the line between them moved with the season. Lake of the Isles in particular was less a lake than a wet idea. When the park board looked at it in the 1880s, they found something like 100 acres of open water surrounded by 67 acres of swamp and 33 acres of dry ground. In summer, parts of it were a mosquito flat. That was the honest condition of the place. What we ride past now is not a lake that was preserved. It is a lake that was manufactured out of a marsh. This is Dakota land. Minnesota Makos, the land where the waters reflect the clouds, is the Dakota Homeland, and the Dakota are here now, in the present tense, with communities across the state. These lakes are not a Dakota memory. They are a Dakota place with Dakota names that people still use. Bde Maka Ska is Dakota for White Earth Lake. Lake of the Isles carries the Dakota name Topa, 4 islands, for the 4 islands that once stood in it. Hold on to that name, 4 islands, because it is a receipt. It tells you what was here before the dredges came. 4 islands stood in that shallow basin. Today there are 2. Mike's Island and Raspberry Island are still out there, wooded and closed to landing, kept as wildlife refuge. The other 2 were absorbed. They were tied into the new shoreline with dredged fill and turned into dry parkland, and now they are simply ground you can stand on. The lakes appear in Euro-American records early. The English name Lake of the Isles shows up on a map of the Fort Snelling area from 1835, which means the 4 islands were already the thing outsiders noticed first. Through the middle of the century, surveyors ran their chains across this ground, cutting it into sections and quarter sections. The land west of the young town was platted, sold, and traded long before anyone thought of it as a park. Understand what the survey did. It converted a living wetland into a set of numbered rectangles that could be bought. By the 1870s and 80s, the shoreline of Lake of the Isles was in private hands, and speculators were watching. This is the moment when most American cities lost their water. The lakefront gets sold, a fence goes up, and the public never sees the shore again. Minneapolis came within a few years of exactly that outcome. And the city was coming fast. A few miles northeast of here, at the only major waterfall on the Mississippi, flour mills were turning Minneapolis into the milling capital of the world. Money poured in, population multiplied. The city sprawled outward toward these lakes with the momentum of a boom town, and boom towns are not careful. Sawmill smoke, rail lines, land syndicates. The pressure that built this park system was not love of nature. It was fear of losing it. In 1883, the city acted. The Minneapolis Board of Trade pushed for legislation, and a Park Act was ratified on the 3rd of April. The Board of Park Commissioners met for the first time 2 weeks later, on the 17th of April, and within 11 days it had already designated the land that would become Loring Park. 30 acres, roughly $150,000. That is how quickly a city can change its mind about its own future. One of the new board's first acts was to hire a landscape architect named Horace William Shaler Cleveland. He was in his 60s, a contemporary of Frederick Law Olmsted, and he had a single big idea. He produced a report with a map titled Suggestions for a System of Parks and Parkways for the City of Minneapolis. His argument was blunt. Buy the land now, while it is cheap, and while it is still available, because you will never be able to afford it later. Cleveland did not want a park. He wanted a system. Take the natural features the city already had, the lakes, the creek, the river gorge, the waterfall, and connect them with generous parkways so that the whole thing becomes one continuous public landscape instead of a scatter of green squares. That is the founding idea of everything we are riding through today. The parkway is not a road to the park. The parkway is the park. The man who carried it out was Charles Loring, a miller by trade, elected the first president of the park board in 1883, and remembered ever since as the father of the Minneapolis parks. He served 7 years and then kept working for decades more. It was under this early board that the shoreline of Lake of the Isles was largely secured through donations by 1886 and formally designated as park land that November. The islands were the harder fight. In 1887, the board purchased 2 of them for about $35,000, specifically to stop them being built on. Think about what that money bought. Not a building, not a monument. It bought the absence of a building. Every one of these decisions was a bet that a city 50 years in the future would rather have an empty island than a profitable one. It is a bet that paid. The name came from William Watts Falwell, the first president of the University of Minnesota, and later a park board president himself. He suggested this ring of connected parkways could be called the Grand Rounds, and he gave the credit for the idea, in his words justly and gladly, to Horace Cleveland. It is a modest little phrase for what is now roughly 50 miles of continuous parkway, path, and park looping the entire city. And then in 1906, the man who would do the actual cutting arrived. Theodore Wirth was born in Switzerland in 1863. He trained as a gardener and worked in Zurich, London, and Paris before emigrating to the United States in 1888. He ran the parks of Hartford, Connecticut, from 1896, where he built the first municipal rose garden in the country. Then Minneapolis hired him, and he stayed for 29 years. Wirth was superintendent from 1906 to 1935, and then superintendent emeritus until his death in 1949. In those years, he roughly tripled the acreage of the park system. He was not a preservationist. He was a builder, an engineer of landscape, comfortable with dredges and fill and the total remaking of ground. Cleveland drew the vision. Loring bought the land. Wirth is the reason the water on our right has the exact shape it has. The work began on Lake of the Isles in 1907. Floating steam dredges were set into that shallow marsh, and they began pumping the bottom of the lake out through pipes and depositing it on the shore. Between 1907 and 1911, they moved roughly 500,000 cubic yards of peat and silt and sand. They were not cleaning the lake. They were rebuilding it from the bottom up to a plan. The numbers tell you exactly what happened. Before the work, there were about 100 acres of water, 67 acres of swamp, and 33 acres of dry land. After it, there were 120 acres of water and 80 acres of dry land. The swamp did not shrink. The swamp was abolished. Half of it became lake, half of it became the ground beneath this path, and the lake was deepened to an average of about 8 feet. So the shoreline we are following is dredge spoil. The lawn, the boulevard, the tree line, all of it is lake bottom that was lifted and set down again a few dozen yards away. In his annual report for 1907, Wirth noted with satisfaction that the work was already raising real estate values around the lake. That is the part the postcards leave out. Beauty here was also an investment strategy, and everyone involved knew it. Then came the connection. Cleveland's system needed the lakes to be one thing, not several, so the Dredges cut a channel from Lake of the Isles through to Bde Maka Ska. It was finished in 1911, and the city lost its mind over it in the best way. The water opened on the 5th of July, and it triggered a week of celebration, with canoe races, fireworks over Lake Harriet, and a pageant at Loring Park. The pageant told the history of the city and ran for 3 nights to crowds of about 25,000 each. By some accounts, more than 100,000 people took part in the celebrations over the week. Sit with that for a moment. 100,000 people turned out to celebrate a ditch, because it was not a ditch to them. It was proof that the lakes now belonged to everybody and that you could travel between them by water. Two years later, the Dredges came back and cut the Kenilworth Lagoon, joining Lake of the Isles to Cedar Lake. That was finished in 1913. There was a cost, and it is worth naming honestly. Opening the connection dropped the water level of Cedar Lake by about 5 feet. This is the recurring bargain of the chain of lakes. Every gain in the system was paid for somewhere, in water, in wetland, or in ground that no longer exists. What the channels created was a canoe city. Suddenly, you could put a boat in at one lake and paddle for miles through willow-lined lagoons and under low stone bridges, from Cedar to Isles to Bde Maka Ska, without ever lifting your hull out of the water. Canoe liveries appeared. It became a genuine craze. On summer evenings, the lagoons carried hundreds of boats, and the city discovered it had accidentally built itself a water park. Now look at the road beside us, because the road is the argument. It is not built for speed. It is deliberately narrow and curved, posted at 25 miles an hour, closed to heavy trucks, and shadowed by a separate path for people on foot and on wheels. A parkway is a road designed to make you slow down and look sideways. In a country that spent the 20th century building the exact opposite, that is close to a radical act. Stitch it all together and you get the grand rounds. 7 districts, roughly 50 miles, running from the downtown riverfront along the Mississippi Gorge, through Minnehaha, around this chain of lakes, up through Theodore Wirth Park, along Victory Memorial Drive, and back through northeast Minneapolis to the river. Much of the finishing work was done in the 1930s with civilian Conservation Corps labor. It is one of the oldest continuous urban parkway systems in the country. Scenic byways are usually rural. They run through mountains and canyons and empty coastline. The Grand Rounds is the strange exception. It was designated a Minnesota State Scenic Byway in 1997 and a National Scenic Byway in 1998, and it is routinely described as the most significant urban byway in the country. The scenery it protects is not wilderness. It is 140 years of stubborn municipal decisions, hardened into landscape. And the engineered lake is now genuinely alive. Great blue herons stalk the shallows of the Isles. Cormorants dry their wings on the deadfall. Painted turtles line up on every available log. Bald eagles work the open water, and in spring and fall this chain sits under a migration corridor that carries warblers and waterfowl straight over the city. The lake was built by machines, and the herons do not care in the slightest. Keeping it is its own long war. Storm water runs off streets and roofs straight into these basins, carrying phosphorus, salt, and sediment. Bde Maka Ska generally holds decent clarity for swimming, but zebra mussels were confirmed in the lake in 2018, and invasive species do not leave. Fish here carry advisories for mercury and other contaminants. An engineered lake is not a finished object. It is a machine that has to be run forever. Lake of the Isles still shows its origins. It is shallow, an average of only a few feet through much of it, easily warmed, easily loaded with nutrients, quick to green in a hot August. It is the lake that needs the most help because it was always the marsh. Sometimes in the still water near the islands, you can see it trying very patiently to become a swamp again. Given 100 years of neglect, it would. So here is the honest version of this place. These lakes are Dakota lakes on Dakota land with Dakota names, and Dakota people are still here. They were then reshaped, deepened, connected, and framed by a park board that bought the shoreline before anyone could fence it, and by a Swiss gardener with a fleet of dredges. Nature and engineering are not opposites out here. They are two hands doing the same work, a century apart. That is the quiet lesson of the Grand Rounds. The most valuable thing this city ever built was empty space. No fence on the shore, no house on the island, a road that will not let you hurry. Every generation since has been handed a choice about whether to keep it, and so far, every generation has said yes. That is not a small thing. Very few cities in the world can say it, and most of the ones that can copied this. So take one more look at that shoreline and see it for what it is. Not untouched, not wild, but chosen. Water where somebody decided there should be water. Trees where somebody refused to sell. A city that looked at its own lakes and decided they belonged to everyone, and then spent 140 years proving it meant it. Thank you for watching. Follow for more trails of the world.